Live from Press Play, this is Office Hours on releasing good music on a bad budget.
Hey guys, thanks for coming. My name is Ben, and welcome to Office Hours. This is a monthly series that we do to talk about topics around the music industry for young artists. It's a collaboration between the Rising Artists Foundation and UMAW. The Rising Artists Foundation, which I'm a co-founder of, is a 501c3 nonprofit, and we give grants and education and resources to young artists around the country. And UMAW is a member-funded and run organization that's working to organize music industry laborers to fight for a more just industry and to join with the other workers in the struggle for a better society. I guess a little bit about myself. I've been an artist manager for about 13 years, run a couple record labels, and then I started the Rising Artists Foundation about in 2019. So we're here with some amazing people who can introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, I'm Robbie. Robbie Gong. I'm the Director of Artists and Industry Relations at BeatBread. So we're a financial funding company that funds artists, labels, distributors, and yeah.
Hello, I'm Moses Sumney. I'm a singer, songwriter, multidisciplinary artist, and I've been working with Rising Artists Foundation for a little bit. And I put out records.
Hey, my name is Brandon Sánchez. I co-run a label called Human Pitch for the last decade, as well as another label and club night here in New York City called Slink. And I'm also an artist manager at ATC Management and a DJ producer as well.
Hi everyone, I am Fabienne Leys. Everyone calls me Fab. I am a longtime manager of artists, producers, and writers, based here in New York now, also with the lovely ATC Management, and very excited to be here today.
Thanks for being here. So for all these office hours sessions, people, artists submit some questions to us ahead of time. Normally the discussions are about 2 hours. This one's pretty compressed, so we are just going to be running off of those questions. So in general, the questions kind of focused around 3 different topics, mostly about like how, where to allocate budgets when you're putting out your releases. Also some questions about personal and creative and community aspects of running your own business as a musician, and then some kind of big picture theoretical thought starters. So I guess we'll just try to hit all of those in the time we can. And so the first main question that came in is, again, just about how to allocate small budgets when you're putting out releases. So what moves the needle? I guess, you want to start with Moses, who recently put out a self-released amazing album and film and multifaceted project? Want to start us off?
Yeah, so how to start with small budgets, I guess.
Or just when you were putting out your project, did you sit down and say, okay, here's the money I have, and what was your thought process of like how that money would be spent most effectively?
Mm-hmm. So I put out an EP this year called Softcore, which is the first EP of new material I made after I left my deal with my record label, Jack Jaguar, who I put 2 albums out with prior to. And I think the difference this time was just counting every dollar myself before going into the process. But I also released it. I did a distribution. I self-released it, but did a distribution deal with AWOL. And so I bore the cost of creating the project and just tried to do as much of it, cost effectively as possible, working at home, working in studios, and then talking to my team. I I have business managers, thankfully, that I can say, okay, how much money do I have and how much can I spend? And so I think the big difference was, instead of waiting for someone else to tell me, like, okay, this is how much you can spend, I had to just go look at my own money and decide how much of that I could afford to spend on this project. And then all of the sort of, or not all, but most of the marketing costs I was able to share with the distributor.
As Brandon, you run a label with, a small independent label. Like, I guess from the label perspective, when an artist is putting out a release on your label, how do you help them think through this question of, like, okay, here's the budget, how should they spend it?
At the very base level, we should be creating the art itself. So first, funds should be allocated to making sure that the music is the best it can sound, the artwork is the best it can look. How are we just creating the work that is going to be shared by the artist and the label? But it's like, what are we actually using the money for? And it's usually to pay labor, to pay people to make things, help create things. So I've never done anything I do in the music industry by myself. I truly think it takes a village to create art. It takes a community to create art and to listen to art and to accept art. So I've always done my label with friends. I've released music with my friends. I've created things with my friends. And I think especially for a small independent label, working with independent artists, thinking of it more as like a cooperative instead of like a company. It's like, how can we, if we don't have the monetary funds to fund this art project, how can I look to my community to see who can help me create artwork in exchange for, I don't know, other creative services? Like my partner at Human Pitch, he's a producer and musician himself, so he mixes and masters the records, so we don't have to spend money that way. A lot of the times we're working with, like, he makes art himself, so he'll make the artwork for the releases. So I do think it's about being resourceful within your community too, and if you are an independent artist, like looking at the people around you and asking yourself, can I collaborate with my friends to put this out together in a way?
And Fab, from a management perspective, when you're looking to put stuff out and you have to, balance all these factors, sometimes there's a big team, sometimes it's just you and the artist. Like, what is the first thing that you think that truly, like, moves the needle? Once the artwork and the music is there, what's the first thing you look to do?
Yeah, so I guess just to add on to what Brandon was saying as well, and probably most of you in the audience who maybe have already released music independently or just created it independently, feedback. You definitely lean into your community and do favorable kind of, I think, partnership deals to save money on just the A&R of putting it all together. So in my experience as a manager working with independent artists for over a decade at this point, it is a lot about pulling favors. And I'm not saying like everyone in the room should just go ask people to work for free forever, but you can always do a master share back-end deal once something is independently released on DSPs, so the producers, if you collaborate with other musicians, you can get, they can kind of make back, have a little ownership of what they put forward. But jumping ahead, yes, okay, now we've magically got our music, we've got our gorgeous artwork that we found an amazing photographer to do for like $500 or something. I'll just give a quick example. I had an artist who eventually got upstream to a major label, but we independently released her first EP, and we were able to negotiate with the distro company at the time. Moses name-checked AWOL, which is a really well-known now label services and artist distribution company that you can go with. It's, there's CD Baby, there's DistroKid, there's TuneCore. Anyway, we were able to work with the artist relations team at the time who were willing to, as you've also mentioned, give forward some budget for marketing expense, and it was not a lot of money. So divvying that up in a way that's as effective as possible, and how can you stretch those dollars? So I think nowadays in 2024, with artists, everyone's talking about the super fan, right? And really understanding where your audience is or what audience it is that you are trying to reach. And so you're probably better suited with maybe taking whatever minimal budget you do have and investing that in working with somebody who can help you build on your digital profile, getting, your social accounts active, seeing on the back end who is consuming the content that you're putting out, whether it's music or whatever you're sharing on your social media. I'm less inclined to nowadays advise somebody independently to just come out the gate like handing somebody 10 grand to do PR. I think publicity is something that is important to furthering your visibility as an artist, but it's something that maybe should come a little bit later on, because you do want to develop your own community with your fans, and that's also something to be mindful of if you're a live performer. So if you're spending so much time on the creative, you want to make sure that that's also translating when you eventually are playing shows. So I would say probably investing in a bit of digital ads, things of that nature to promote the music itself, great visuals, and hopefully being able to pay your band if you go out with a band and put on a show that people want to come back to see. I think those are some of the things that immediately come to mind on the independent side of it all.
Totally. Well, so that, I guess that leads to the question of like, when, if this is a very early release for you, if it's your first EP, your first album, something like that, like how do all of you guys think about what returns are you looking for? Are you looking for, just to get some people to listen? Are you going to expect any streaming returns? Are you like, what does success look like, and how can that also help shape the budget conversation? I guess that could be any of you.
I feel like every artist has their, to quote one of the people we work with, has their own why. So when you identify as an artist what it is that you are trying to achieve, everybody has it's subjective success. Like, Moses, I don't want to speak for you. You can probably speak to what your vision is as an artist and where you're trying to exist and expand in the world. Some folks may just want to be successful touring artists who sell a lot of merch, and they're perfectly happy with that. Some people may want to, be at the top of the Hot 100 and do all of it and be a huge pop star. So I think it's just setting certain goals that are realistic along the way and maybe working backwards from that. But yeah, everybody has different benchmarks for success, for sure.
Yeah, for me, in the early days and even now, I think the return is almost never financial, unfortunately. It's more about raising awareness about an important cause, which is me. And it's about audience. It's about finding the audience and then building the audience and being able to create a culture around the art that you make. And resources for me have almost always gone into that. Every time I'm releasing a project, I feel like, okay, I'm re-identifying who the audience is, trying to reach them, trying to bring them in closer, trying to build a world for them to understand. And I think that's the best way for a new artist to expend their resources.
So, Robbie, you have been a manager, and now you're working more on the financial side, building people's budgets for releases. Can you talk about, like, what goes into that? When you are meeting an independent artist and they come to you and say, hey, we have an EP, we have an album together, like, what are the factors that you consider, and do you advise them on this, or like what's your process with them?
Yeah, so our company, we give advances based on catalog. We also factor in new releases if that's, it's completely customizable. If you're looking to get an advance just on the catalog, we can do that. We can do catalog and new releases. And it's all data-driven and AI, AI is a tricky word that can mean a lot of things these days, but yeah, it's all data driven. So there's not much, you know, negotiation. It's kind of like we put in the royalty statements to our system, and the data spits out what we think it's worth and everything like that. And you know, our proprietary system is really good in that, you know, we've given out about 1,300 advances since 2020, and our cash flow production model is within like a 98% accuracy in terms of like what it spits out. You know, given that there's a plethora of, you know, music data, music streaming data and stuff like that, and all these data points that can predict really accurately. And so when we give out advances, we are agnostic in that, like, here's your money, you know, you can do whatever you want with it. If you want to go spend it on a new car, that's your prerogative. We don't suggest that. And we find that the success stories, you know, as you guys said, success looks different for everyone. But the successful, you know, artists and managers and labels that we work with, we find that whenever they come to us and the initial conversation is like, hey, we want an advance for marketing, we want an advance to make this music video, we need to pay producers, we need, you know, there's just a plan laid out of like what they need the money for. And that's where, you know, we find the most success, because we know that they're not overspending, that, you know, they want the money not just to have in their pockets, but to invest in themselves and grow their business. So yeah, so I think that's what like we see success as, where, you know, it's when you're an artist, you're essentially a small business in and of itself. So just investing wisely and, you know, just growing with any advances or any, you know, money that you have available.
So I guess thus far we've had a number of like funding options come up, right? So, you know, an alternative model, like, you know, advanced model like BeatBread, distro conversations, label conversations. So obviously when you get money from any of these sources, you're going to have to pay them back somehow, right? And they all have different recoupment models, and, you know, they all take different percentages. I guess, Brandon, this one I'll throw to you. How do you weigh which one could be right for the project in terms of like, okay, we just need a distro operation, or we need a full label, or we can do this ourselves and get a loan? And does the phase of an artist's career play into that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, speaking from my experience co-running my labels, we were mostly working with like hobbyist artists. You know, all the artists that we work with are not doing art full time. They're not paying their bills with their art. They have to find other sources of income to sustain their lives. And I run my label not as like a for-profit business. It's really a passion of love for me. I have a day job that pays my bills, but I put the money that I make from that day job back into the label. So when I'm making budgets with my collaborators, we are expecting to not see that money back. Like, that is money that we're spending and that we're okay with investing in artists in our community and friends, and that's okay. What was the second part of the question?
Just the different funding options and, you know, the recoupment. Like, how do you decide which?
So yeah, I mean, in terms of recoupment, we aren't expecting to recoup. We are fronting most of the costs for the artists, and it's more like we're down to make that investment in our community. Yeah.
Do you like, if you have an artist project and that, you know, you're deciding, okay, do we do a distro route? Do we do a full label thing? Like, where they all, you know, take different percentages. Where do you see that kind of that value in them? And do you see it's worth? Which one do you find worth it for different phases?
I think a lot of artists now, because there's a lot less gatekeeping happening between the artist and their fans, and how they are able to release and distribute and market their brand, whether it's music, content, whatever that looks like. So I feel like there is this real, there's been a shift rather to really understanding and embracing the indie approach. Major labels were the top of the hill for decades and decades and decades, right? And now you've seen this sort of artists taking their control back. And that is because of the fact that the DSPs and the income that you make from streaming on the master side is much more lucrative, and you don't need a major label. Like back in the day, it was like they owned all the CD manufacturing, all the physical manufacturing, so you had to go through a label because they were the ones who were going to physically press your music and sell it in stores. And now you can just go through some distro situation, give them, I don't know, 10%, and for service fees, because you're going to do a lot of the heavy lifting anyway when it comes to creating the world, building your team, figuring out how you're going to really tell your story. It's not, major labels are great, and there are quite big artists who get those big budgets and, fine. But as you're making your way through the industry from the ground up, it's definitely something now where people are much more respected for going the indie route. So I'm very pro that, personally. I think ownership as an artist and a creator is key. And when you realize how much a major label deal can take from an artist, and then what they could make if they just owned it themselves, again, there's nothing better than owning the art that you've put out into the world. But you do want to be cautious, right? Like Brandon says, we don't expect to recoup, right? But you do have to make some money back at some point. So you just have to always be mindful of, where you're at in the marketplace in terms of your value, and weighing that against what your potential distro or label partner is willing to come to the table and invest in you and having success together. So you have to look at it as a true partnership and realize, okay, if I only want to give them 15%, then I can't expect them to hand me this massive, blank check if I'm not coming in with proven success already, right? Like everyone kind of has to hedge their bets in a way. So you do want to be a good partner on both sides. Not every label is the bad guy, so to speak. I don't know if that exactly answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
But there's just, it's a sliding scale of how you can divvy up who owns a piece of your art with you, I think.
So it's come up a couple times that artists have to think of themselves as a small business, and I guess Moses, this one will be for you. How do you maintain your creative integrity while also thinking about budgets and marketing plans and releasing independently? Are you able to compartmentalize those things?
I am largely able to compartmentalize, but I think every artist has to measure for themselves what their ability to compartmentalize is, because the more time that you spend thinking about administrative or financial things, for a lot of people, the more it takes away from your ability to be creative. There's only so many hours in the day. So I think you do have to accept that as a small business owner, a good amount of your time is going to end up going to doing business things. But then depending on who you are, that can drain you creatively. Like, it's not necessarily an equal balance of like, I'll do 3 hours on emails and looking at budgets, and then 5 hours working on music, because 5 of those hours might be spent sitting and staring at your computer or at your instrument and being like, why is nothing coming out? And sometimes nothing's coming out because you just spent 3 hours looking at emails. And so it's tricky for me.
Arguing with your label.
Or you're pissed because it's like your label just told you that you can't do this thing, or why did you do that? Or your manager told you that this thing and you took it personally. Like, as a creative person, you just process information in sometimes irrational ways. I feel fortunate that I'm very able now, especially, to switch. Like, I've been self-releasing for the past 3 years. I've also been managing myself for the past 3 years, which I don't necessarily recommend. But my brain, I'm able to be like, yeah, did you send the email? Did you get the new proofs? Oh, for maybe it's ADHD. But I think the best thing that you can do, if you are able to, is to share. And like you said, like no one can do everything by themselves. And so if you have the privilege of being able to have any sort of team that you can delegate to, or you can share duties with, or even people who can advise you, the best thing to do is bring in someone who can take on some of those duties and give you more space to be creative.
And so
One quick thing I just want to chime in on with the advanced conversation. Aside from like that money having to be made back, always account for the IRS. I always have to say that for people that are like, oh yeah, I just got this fat check and I'm going to spend the whole thing. It's like, you're going to have to pay taxes on that.
and it's also, yeah, I mean, I also think a common...
So the number isn't always the number.
Right. And also, I think when people see in advance, whether that's from a loan, a financial company or a label or a distro thing, I think people need to be reminded that it's a loan to you. It is not a check. And I think that's commonly sort of glossed over sometimes, especially when you're just starting. It's not free money they're giving you. It needs to be recouped.
And the same thing can be said on the publishing side, because a lot of people nowadays will say, well, don't sign to a label yet. See if you're, able to get a small publishing deal, which is more of the same. You're just signing over your copyright as opposed to your master. So it's something to keep in mind as well. Publishing is also an option if you need some money.
Do you want to talk a little bit about like when in a career is a good time to kind of think about that as a way to fund stuff?
Well, that's another one that's like an asset, right? Like I'm sure some of you are familiar with the whole gold rush over the last few years of all these major artists who are selling their catalog, like selling off basically all their songs and their publishing copyrights. But I think that, again, it's like the longer you can hold out and build your own leverage, the better deal you'll probably get long term. But there are also solutions for somebody to just administer your publishing if you're self-releasing music. Quite a few, in fact, that don't take 50% of your copyright for the life of the copyright. So, yeah, my artists are all signed to admin deals as well, so it's a much more favorable split. I think you're also in an admin deal too, because in that way you get your copyright back, your catalog back. So, sorry, that was a meandering
That was good.
thing, but. It's not always the labels that are giving you the money, is all I'm saying.
Right. Robbie, when you are looking at, tons of proposals come across your desk from young artists and labels and whoever looking for advances, specifically for artists who have a project ready to go and come to you with, a proposition they want to fund this and this and this for the campaign. What are some red flags that you see? Or without naming any names, can you talk about any mistakes that you've seen made and what has been learned from it?
Well, we don't really deal as much in like prospecting future projects. Like we don't, when an artist comes across our desk, we don't look at them like a normal label does, where it's like, okay, this is what we project into the future, like based on potential. Like we deal a lot in like what your catalog has done and kind of based off that. But on the catalog and in the red flags that we see, and there's a lot of times where our data spits out a number and it's like, this is what we project you to, your streaming income to be over the next 3-5 years. And a lot of times it's lower than what the artist or what the manager is like, no, like I have 500,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. Like, no, this equates to that. And it's like, yeah, but our data is showing, or our system is showing that a lot of those plays come from passive playlists. A lot of that comes from discovery mode. And, you guys have talked about building your community and building those super fans. And the data will show that, where it's like, I'm sure you guys all seen your back ends on DSPs, like, these are the people that listen X amount of times, or, this song is played by X amount of times by the same people. So I think, I wouldn't really call it a red flag, but I think it's just like back to building that real strong community and that real fan base. It'll show in your streams, because those are kind of like the evergreen songs where it's like, okay, that projection of streams, which equates to income, it's gonna stay flat or steadily rise for over time, and not just like kind of peak and valley, which is really hard to kind of bank on when you're thinking about like long-term financial stability from your streaming income.
Totally.
The data doesn't lie.
Yeah, I think that some people can see some random kind of like TikTok moment or something like that, and interpret that as, oh, I have this much stability moving forward. I have this many monthly listeners, but those aren't, for the most part, those aren't fans who are supporting you, and supporting your career. That's very kind of like a blip in the numbers.
And a lot of times we see sometimes where it's like they featured on a bigger artist song, which is great, but I think a big focus should be is like, okay, how do you then convert those fans over to your fans to keep them long term? And so, again, it's not like a red flag, but just more, how do you build like a real steady community that's going to keep coming back and that you can count on?
Totally. I guess one big question that we got is how to think about investing in content and socials. Came up a lot. Who has thoughts on that? Brandon, Moses?
I need advice on this one.
It's hard because it depends on what kind of artist you are. Like, I don't know if, the type of artist that you are, I don't think your fans would be like, well, why isn't he on TikTok doing this TikTok dance like everyone else? Like, nobody needs to see Moses doing that. They don't know him for that. But it is a necessary evil, and it is a full-time job to create content. And it costs money, and time is also money. So if you spend, if you've allocated 3 hours out of your day to bank content, that could turn into 7 because you're trying to figure out how to edit a reel or something silly. But it is something that is important for, I think, people to pay attention to and to invest into, as far as they understand where their audience actually lives and wants to experience them and how they want to experience them. But content is the most important thing over everything else right now.
But tying that back to one of your earlier points, Fab, in that, okay, press might not be as much of a bang for your buck as it used to be.
Yeah, it's not a needle mover with fans.
Right,
Yeah.
and so then, but formerly that role was a lot about storytelling, and people are like, okay, well, I still want to tell my story. How do I do that? By socials or whatever. Is there a balance here that they can strike and still kind of communicating who they are, what the story is, what the vibe of the release is, without pouring too much money into it?
I guess it just depends. You'd have to manage your expectations, because you can find people that will do PR for you within a certain number, right? Like a high-end 5-star PR agency will run you, I don't know, minimum $5,000 a month, which is like a serious investment for anybody, even no matter what level you're on. But you can find folks that will help you sort of craft, and understand like press blasts and sending out a press release, fielding requests that may come in, looking out for some of the more tastemaker outlets that people are paying attention to, and maybe communicating with the trades. Yes, that is important to do, especially around the time of an actual release. You want to give any PR person at least 6 to 8 weeks prior to your release to actually set it up, right? To get people aware in those spaces. But I'm not saying it's a make or break thing either. Like, yes, you have to publicize it so that you have a narrative, so that as people discover you, they can be like, oh yeah, this is the person that, they came from a broken home and da-da-da, whatever. But it's not necessarily going to translate to, as Robbie said, it's not going to mean like, well, I was featured in Billboard and now I've jumped 500,000 listeners on Spotify. I think that's also kind of can be a little bit of a disconnect. Like if you have a viral moment on socials or you're a press darling, but it's not translating always into people consuming your music or your content. So I guess there's not an exact science to it, but it can get very expensive if you have really high expectations and it doesn't actually translate to a return in a financial way.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's really about setting expectations. I have a hard time answering this question because of the different hats that I wear, because the label work I do and the music I release and like the club nights that I put on comes from an extremely DIY vantage point. But then the artists that I work with at my day job are all signed to labels. So I think for the purpose of being in New York City with the people in this room, I think it makes more sense to talk about the DIY perspective, because that's, I feel like artists signed to labels are a very small percentage of artists who exist out there. So from the DIY perspective, we don't do much social media at all, honestly, and it is about setting expectations, because if artists are making music for the sake of making music, they just want to create and share music with the world and their friends and each other, then we do that by sharing, for example, the labels that I run are electronic and dance music labels. So the way we get the word out there is we do a lot of the grunt work and hit up all the DJs we know in our community around New York and internationally. We ask them, hey, do you want to sign up to our newsletter? Do you want us to send you promos for music that we're putting out? 99% of the time, if they answer you, they're going to say yes. And so after a couple years of doing that, we've grown our list of DJs to like a couple hundred DJs that we send our music out to. And the artists who are making that music don't really have to do much other than just posting on Instagram when the music's out, like really like minimal, like, hey, my track's out now, my release is out now. But the DJs are getting their music and doing that promo work for them organically. But those artists' expectations are like, they're not trying to pay their rent every month through the music. So it's just like a different level of expectation setting, because you can release music commercially in like a for-profit mentality, or you could just be making art, because making art is everything. Like people everywhere make art every day. Like everybody is an artist, really.
Yep. And putting on my old manager hat, like I think it's also, you have to think about like how you want to interact with your fan base, and it's like kind of what type of relationship you want to have with them, where there's all, with tech nowadays and the internet, there's so many different avenues, whether it's Instagram, social media, or you want to go more direct, where it's like a Discord channel or live streaming and stuff like that. Like I think it's really valuable if you do decide you want to have like a really intimate relationship with your fans, like if you can cultivate that and own that space where you're not, where an algorithm change on a social media platform, if that changes, your fan base is still going to be there. I know a lot of artists have utilized like the Instagram like groupings where you can join and like you can broadcast it out to like a fan base that has signed up and said, hey, we want to subscribe to you, pretty much. I think that's a really kind of important choice that you need to make, because it's different for all artists, and and again, I think a lot of what we say comes with the caveat of it's not a one size fits all, where for instance, like if you're Frank Ocean, he can not interact with his fans, and people are just pining for everything, any small cryptic thing he puts out. Just like how do you like interact with your fans? If you do, like what medium do you like to kind of use?
I don't like to interact with them, but no, I'm kidding. I use Instagram a lot. I really like Instagram. I love Instagram sometimes, although the algorithm is challenging now, but all of the algorithms are. I think that your point about press was really good, and speaking as a press darling, it's true, or former press darling, it doesn't necessarily translate to listeners in the way that it did 5-10 years ago, and the people who you want to reach are probably no longer reading music blogs in the way that they might have been. So I think it's accepting that. And I also think that what's challenging about social media, especially with TikTok and now Instagram as it responds to TikTok, you're constantly encouraged to chase trends or chase sounds and think about ways to get on a wave that's already happening. And I think that can be really inauthentic for artists. Sometimes maybe you're not a public-facing person, maybe you don't engage with social media in that way. And I think that in the way that press was about, or is about storytelling, to your point, it's good to figure out, how do I tell my story, which is not even how do I share my biography, but it's like, how do I explain or share who I am and what my perspective on the world is through this channel. And that's what I'm trying to figure out. And so I think before people move into a space of advertising, even independent artists advertising your work through social media or putting paid spend into it, it's good to develop your voice and figure out what your authentic voice with social media is, what your perspective is that you're trying to share visually, sonically. And the more authentic you are able to be, authentic to yourself, I think the more you can resonate with an audience. And so that's what I'm trying to find now.
So we have to wrap up in a bit, but I guess UMAW, who we put on these panels with, they do a lot of advocacy work, and they're sort of leading the charge of trying to enact big picture change. Obviously, there's tons of opportunities, but also tons of hurdles for young artists. So, what do you guys, how, as you see everything changing and new models popping up, what would need to change, or what would you like to see change in the broader music industry landscape in order to ensure that artists can make a livable wage for their work and actually expect to earn a living from it?
I can start this one. Yeah, I think it's important to ground ourselves and see why are we even at a panel that's about how artists can release music with financial burdens. Why are there financial burdens in the first place to release art? And it's looking at the country that we live in, the city that we live in. Art is totally commodified. It's like a product. We live under capitalism, and we should identify that as the true enemy here that we should be fighting against always. So I think going into next year with next year's administration, it's going to get worse. There's going to be more cuts to the arts fundings. There's almost no arts funding in this country to begin with, very, very little. Because art isn't valued as a shared human experience in the US. It's a product, and companies want to make money off of it. So I think while we have everyone on this panel has offered lots of great advice for artists to put out music within this system right now, I think it's important to join organizations like UMAW, join local arts organizations doing advocacy work with local arts council members, get together with your friends, protest. I think we should identify that we want socialized art in this country. We want our government to see the value of art and more grants, more public funding going towards it. Other countries are doing that. There are other models for this, so it's not like it's coming out of the blue. Yeah.
And I think that you touched on it before, where I think it's really important to maintain ownership of your rights in terms of your master's rights, your publishing rights, everything like that, because and Fab, you touch on it, like it's a leverage game where, and I realize it's a little bit of like chicken and the egg because you need to grow your catalog in order for it to be worth something. But the more, the longer you can hold on to the ownership of it, and if you can build it up yourself, Moses, you're kind of living it where you own your rights in terms of your new projects and stuff. If you can grow that, then it just gives you like a lot of optionality where if you do eventually want to sell it, you can. But if you want to keep it and have that be just like a monthly or biannually check that comes in, I think that's really important. Where it used to be the record labels will own it, but now with kind of the independent movement, it's an option for independent artists that can grow themselves. And so I think it's just finding options where you can get the funding to get that initially started, and then from there it's retaining ownership of your rights to kind of give you that freedom and flexibility down the line.
I think what I would like to see change or evolve is, or come back to, is just more investment across the industry in artist development and artist sustainability. Because now that everything to a certain extent is kind of democratized and like anybody can make music on their laptop and like throw it up, put it out, it takes years to figure out who you are as an artist, and as you evolve and as your sounds evolve, and it's like everything shouldn't just be about, well, how will this song work within an algorithm? It's crazy to think that you're only working on your third album right now, right? Like you've been at this for over a decade and you're amazing. And like there are so many artists that we all love and appreciate. Like I miss albums, like an album is out and I'm gonna sit and live with this album. And now it's like DSPs will be like, well, why put out the album? Just put out singles, like the way that you've said that the music, the actual art is so commodified. And it would just be nice to see the major corporations that are making so much money because we're buying their products to listen to the music, invest back in ways that the artist can keep going. It's like put the album out, drop a single, you have some success. It costs you your life's worth just to go on tour. And even the promoters, like Live Nation, they have this on the road program now where they invest in smaller acts that are playing across certain venues in North America. You should look into the on the road program for anybody who's a touring act. But they'll actually give you a little bit of money for playing, like you get money back or whatever. But it would be nice to see the opportunity, as Brandon says, to really socialize art and support it because we need it and people spend their money on it. So in any case, that's what I want to see: artist development, investment in the art.
That's great. The music industry is fucked, sorry. And I don't know that I can change it, but what I would like to see is I think that we need to retrain consumers and ourselves as consumers to value music. Like clearly the government doesn't value art, but also we are so used to music being free that we need to kind of think about it. Like if you want, there are so many other industries that we engage with that we like accept that we'll have to pay if we want it. If you want a piece of clothing, you're gonna have to pay for it. If you want to try this piece of this like food, you're gonna have to go find it. And I think we have to think about artists as small business owners that we're ultimately supporting. And I think that artists should start more and more to develop a direct-to-consumer relationship with their audiences as they're able to find them, because a lot of the companies that we rely on to communicate, even Instagram, like people can't even see what you're saying now who want to see it. You're like, if you like an artist, you go listen to them on Spotify. It's like they're not really getting that money either. And so I think starting to develop a direct-to-consumer relationship with your audience, take them to your website to buy your merch, encourage them to buy tickets to your show in a way that's not through Ticketmaster. I think that's the best way to get the most money out of what you're doing. And as a person who loves music, really think about buying the music that you like instead of just streaming it, and on a really kind of person-to-person cultural basis. I think that'll be the best way for artists to start to make more money from what they're putting out, and for audiences to actually own the thing that they like instead of just depending on an algorithm or a social media site or streaming to feed it to them.
I feel like we need to do another panel on just these new platforms that are coming into the forefront that are subscription based, basically artist helmed vehicles for fans. Exactly that, D2C. Like OnlyFans was the one that really kicked it off, right? But now you have all these new cool, like Vault, right? James Blake's like, I'm off Instagram, come see me on Vault, but you got to pay X amount to get it. I think that's to be continued for another day.
Yeah, really. I mean, not to go on, but I've been thinking about OnlyFans all week because there's so many people who are like, adult film stars used to get paid like $5 to like show their bits, and now we've seen that now that they can go direct to the consumers, what they're actually worth, which is like a ton of money. And I think that I would love for people to think about music in the same way, like. If you were not able to get it, like it was just like water, people would actually pay for it and value it more.
I don't actually know if we're out of time or if we have we're out of time. 2 minutes. Okay. Let's take one question from the audience. Who has one question?
Hi, my name is Puck, and I've had a lot of success as a touring pianist for major artists, as well as a little bit of success releasing my own music. I think due to COVID, I haven't been able to find music work the past couple years, and so I'm back to being a barista. But I have a lot of cool kid points from the work I've done, but I'm a minimum wage worker right now. So like, having that $500 to invest in my own music is like a few months of saving, to be honest. What do we do with our cool kid points? Like, how do we wield that in order to, make the next move where if you were to look at my numbers right now, my numerical value, you would not give me that advance. What do I do?
Well, I was just going to say, if you were a touring musician, you have a network. And I think a big part of the music industry is, I always refer to it as a high school that no one graduates from, right? Like it's all the same folks, all the same players, no pun intended. So in terms of just maybe getting back into the space where you're not making all your money having to do minimum wage work, who are the MDs that you're friendly with? Who are the other musicians? I mean, touring is happening again. So that might be another way for you to be able to at least make some money in the gig economy again off of what you do best, which is be an artist and a musician. I think that's, I'd start hitting people up again. Look at some of your favorite artists and just see, I'm not talking about like, we love Chapel Roan, but like, everybody follows Chapel Roan, but like, some people that you respect their music that are in the space that you're familiar with, and reconnect with some of the folks that you already knew, and see like what's going out this year ahead, like where you can kind of jump back into things and meet with people. And I that's like my first advice, just connect with people, because you might find money pretty quick that way. I don't know. Yeah.
All right. I think that's all the time we have. Thank you guys for coming. And follow the Rising Artist Foundation and UMAW on socials, mailing list, all that stuff. And we do these once a month. So come to the next one. Thank you.